Do you crave better self-esteem and confidence, but struggle to silence your anxiety, fears, and insecurities? If so, welcome to the sisterhood of fellow travelers on the path to reclaiming their self-confidence and happiness. I'm Jennifer DeBellis, award-winning author, speaker, and assault survivor. I spent the past few decades helping young women like you overcome fear, self-doubt, and trauma to reclaim their joy and self-worth. I cannot wait to share the secrets I learned on my own healing journey and help you restore your inner warrior as I show you the skills and tools you need to save your own broken world. If you're ready to empower your inner warrior to overcome fear, doubt, and anxiety, turn off those distractions and tune in to this episode. Today's episode brings us full circle to my final strategy, secret number 5. It's time to cut yourself free from the dead weight holding you back from living your most beautiful, powerful life. Previously, we explored the first 4 secrets to building and restoring our confidence, value, and purpose as we heal internally, wrestle with life's complexities and grit, embrace an overcomer's mindset, face the giants named fear and doubt. This 5th episode in this 5-part series is dedicated to secret number 5. It's time to cut yourself free from the dead weight holding you back from living your best life. Inside this episode, you'll gain a better understanding of what it means to carry around dead weight, hear the 2 stories that shaped how I learned to cut myself free, learn actionable steps to confront your struggles and cut yourself free from the things holding you back. Trick number 1, daily practices of small acts of kindness towards self and others. And trick number 2, spend time in the wilderness to rewrite your survival guide. Your next steps and ways to connect with me. If this podcast inspires you and you've been following it along, consider joining my free Facebook community, the Restore Your Inner Warrior Sisterhood. Here's a safe space to get tips, share stories, and find community connection. I know you've probably heard this saying, carrying around extra baggage or carrying dead weight. I love this analogy and use it often in my books and some of the speeches that I give because it's such a great visual and it's really relatable. We tend to carry around a lot of figurative baggage, and what we don't realize is that that dead weight is really hurting us the most. And we keep adding more baggage or more stuff to the baggage and then carry it around when it's this impossibly heavy load. It's impossible to live a normal, healthy life while you're carrying around all this extra dead baggage. What I've learned through my own healing and coaching others is that when you cut yourself free from the dead weight of your trauma, your restoration journey and life thrive. Seriously. When people ask me how I keep smiling through it all, it's not because I'm faking it until I make it or pretending everything's okay when it's not. Though I do rely on humor to get through a lot of tough stuff, what people outwardly see as resilience is more accurately that I put in a lot of intentional time and work into the internal healing stuff. And I regularly lighten my load by not carrying around all that extra baggage everywhere I go. I open up the first episode in this series with an analogy, and I'm going to share a quick version of that here with you right now, which is also part of the opening of the self-help book that accompanies the speaking series by the same name, Restore Your Inner Warrior. So when we talk about the ultimate challenge and the ultimate goal is that we have to fix things in our lives. They don't just fix themselves. And it's up to us to assess the damages from life's storms and then do the necessary repairs. And so the visual that I used is that imagine that you're on a ship at sea and you've been tasked with stabilizing it after it has survived a really bad storm. And you realize that your ship has taken on some water, it's taken some hardships, and you have to assess the damages and you have to start taking action because the boat's going to sink and you're going to sink and drown with it. But here's the thing. Since the damage is already done, the important thing is to focus on what to do to move forward, not to focus on the things that have already happened, which you can't control and you certainly can't change. So not only do I talk about this in the Restore Your Inner Warrior self-help book, I also talk about this in my first self-help book, Warrior Sister, Cut Yourself Free. To repair something that's physically broken, you must allow what is broken to heal, and you must do the same thing with emotional healing, although that healing process looks a little bit different. But I want you to imagine that ship analogy that I just gave you. Imagine that you got shipwrecked. And so now you have to go ashore. And while you're ashore, you're kind of in this new wilderness. And now you have to figure out how to survive. You have to bring a lot of your survival skills. You're trying to figure out what baggage has come off of the boat that is usable, not usable. And you've got that baggage that you have tied to your back that you don't let go, that you tried to swim ashore with, and that was kind of drowning you the whole time you were trying to swim to shore. So now you have to go through that bag and you have to really figure out, what do you need? What do you need out of that is beneficial for your survival and for your best life? Like the life that you want, that you imagine, that where you'll be thriving. I want you to be thinking about this shipwrecked analogy and how it may apply to your restoration journey as you are rebuilding that inner warrior and really trying to figure out what you need for not only your survival, but to thrive and to work toward that life that you see in the future that you desire and all the things that you want to fill that life with. What do you need and what don't you need? So just be thinking about that as we're moving forward with this episode. There's an ancient Roman story that I talk about in Warrior Sister Cut Yourself Free that deals with capital punishment and its literal connections to carrying around dead weight. I also talk about it in Restore Your Inner Warrior, and we're covering it here in this fifth episode in the series. Some of the details are a little bit gory, but I'll try to tone it down a bit for you squeamish folks. Promise that if you just stick with me, it'll all make sense when I connect it to the message here today. Right. During the Roman Empire, emperors were known to invent heinous, often bizarre punishments for crimes. A lot of these had symbolic significance, and some of them had weighted elements to them that connected to the crime. This theatrical tactic grew from a long history of punishment playing out as entertainment in the gladiator ring. It was also a place where these leaders could use kind of public fear. They could use this sense of fear to instill in the spectators that if you get out of line, if you misstep, you could be next, and this is what you'll go through. And so, of course, it was very effective. But as things go, you're kind of removed when you're a spectator in a bleacher. So as the luster of this, as the fear factor started to dim, they started to bring the punishments to the street. And the punishment that they had for murderers was the most gruesome. And what they would do is they would connect the murdered victim to the murderer's back, bound at the wrists, bound, I mean, back to back. So they would bind the ankles, bind at the wrists, and you would have to walk around. The murderer would have to walk around with this dead weight, literally dead weight connected to them. And there was no time period where that dead weight would be cut from you. You were to walk around with this dead weight. And at first, maybe if you were kind of a strong person, then, um, you could carry it around. You could carry around that extra weight. It didn't get to you at first. But the thing is everywhere you went, you were haunted by your victim. Your victim followed. You could always feel it. Eventually, you start to smell the victim behind you. And the reality of carrying around this dead weight soon became very apparent to you. Rigor mortis started to set in and it made movement almost impossible. So now you've got this stiff dead body on you and you can't bend your arms at the joints anymore. You can't bend your knees and it becomes difficult. Now, a few days in, that smell is unbearable. So any family members or friends who may have been kind of hanging around with you up to this point, they're like, later, Gator, I'm out of here. Like, this is awful. You smell. Soon the flies and the other pests assist with the decomposition, and then infectious disease from the decaying corpse slowly starts to enter your body through your skin. So your inevitable death is going to be slow and painful. Death by association was always your fate. It was a capital punishment. You were a dead man walking the moment that victim's corpse was strapped to your back. So, how does this apply to us? Well, when it comes to our baggage, we seem to assume a double punishment. We are punished through the initial issue, the initial experience that wounded us, that hurt us. And then we take on this punishment that was meant for the person who harmed us. It's not meant for us. But we put that dead weight on us and we carry it around and we expect to just go on with life and live like a healthy, normal, thriving life while this dead weight is decaying on our back. And we're carrying around this stench everywhere we go. It's literally infecting or figuratively infecting our interactions, our attitudes, our character, to eventually people just don't want to be around us because our attitude stinks because we haven't dealt with the issues and this dead weight is just killing us. It's killing everything good about us. So we hurt ourselves and become a twofold victim when we carry around this extra weight. So the ultimate form of justice occurs when we separate ourselves from these things that bind us in these cycles of torment and we cut ourselves free. And the moment that we release that dead weight, that punishment that was never meant for us, we recover and thrive. That's how we're able to do it. There's really no way around it. Can you have moments of feeling like yourself, moments of enjoyment? Absolutely. Can you feel like you're thriving? Absolutely. But I'm talking about your whole overall quality of life. So I'm going to share a story about my high school, we'll call her my frenemy. And this story leads into another story that happened years later when I befriended a mom from one of my daughter's preschool. So, you may have heard me mention in a couple of the previous episodes that I'm a motorcycle accident survivor. And during my recovery from my physical injuries, I was left with all this time to deal with and heal from a lot of my emotional trauma and baggage from my past experiences. And that was really the thing that started catapulting me into a different lifestyle. I didn't get it all right overnight, but it was when my learning journey and my trial and error journey really began, and it began in a much more intentional, focused, and effective way. So at this time, I got serious again about being intentional about setting and maintaining clear boundaries. So I want you to hold on to that idea of boundaries. Okay. I worked through the grief to resolve my past trauma. And this is kind of a really loose list of how I did that. So, one of the first things that I did was I went into the wilderness of my experience. And you see this spiritual practice in so many communities where you literally or you figuratively go into this wilderness. And when you're there, you are connecting with yourself. And there are lots of different ways that you can connect with yourself, but you're going through meditations, you're going through, a lot of, sometimes you're not sleeping. And in that sleep deprivation, your subconscious starts to unlock a lot of different things, but you're really getting quiet and you're viewing things from different perspectives. So you're trying to pull things out and then sift through them and then learn what you need and don't need to survive. And then you're going to try to lighten your load, that baggage that you're carrying around. And while you're there, once you've done all these things, you have to decide to rewrite your survival guide. You have to establish new and clear boundaries. You have to figure out what end goals that you have in mind. What are your ultimate desires? Where do you hope to see yourself in the future? And those have to come into you establishing those boundaries. So you can't say, I want to be more accepted in my relationships, be accepted by the people who I am in relationships with, and then not have clear boundaries to foster that and to hold people accountable to specific things. And I'm not saying put a huge amount of expectations, but you'll understand where I'm going with this particular concept. So I just want to mention it, okay? Then you have to enforce those boundaries moving forward. So once you have them established, you have to set your mind to saying, these are the boundaries. And this is a lot easier of a task when you're in new or not long-term relationships. It kind of takes on a different form when you're in longer-term relationships because you have to make different adjustments
and you don't always get to talk to people about what your boundaries are. In long-term relationships, there's a lot of trauma and things and brokenness that you have to work out, and it takes a little bit of a different strategy. But what I want to talk to you about here, more particularly, are these, shorter term relationships that you've been in, or these newer ones that you have just formed. Okay. So going back to where I had to learn a lot of hard lessons about boundaries or lack thereof boundaries and how carrying around all that dead weight doesn't do me any good goes back to my high school days when I had this individual who I idolized her. I looked up to her. There were so many things where I was inspired. I wanted to be like her, and not once but twice she somehow was disenchanted with me or whatever it was. To this day, I'm not really sure how things went down because sometimes when you're on the other side of the gossip and the slander, you just get the aftermath of people's rejection and the bullying and all that stuff that happens. But for whatever reason, she decided to turn everyone, not just our friends, but entire schools against me. And this happened in ninth grade, and this happened again, I think my senior year of high school. And so, the first time it happened, it was extremely shocking because here I go from being this new kid all the time at all these different schools. Those of you who didn't tune into that first episode, I went to four schools just to finish kindergarten. I started my ninth school by the time I was in fifth grade, which is, it is overwhelming to think about. It's overwhelming for me to think about it now, but somehow I managed it. So you could say that I had a very different outlook on being accepted and being rejected and having to start over and what friendship looked like. And I didn't necessarily have long-term friends when it came to, a lot of the kids that I went to high school with had known each other since preschool or known each other since, elementary school and then through junior high and high school. And here I was coming to the school just before middle school and starting to develop friendships. So this individual happened to be a neighbor, so we of course had a lot of convenient time to spend with each other outside of school and outside of athletics because close proximity. So we lived close. So for whatever reason, she decides she doesn't want to be friends with me, and it's not enough to just stop talking to me. She completely ruins my life. Fast forward, I somehow managed to forgive her years later in high school, and she apologizes, all that stuff. I bring her into the fold of my whole new friend group. It wasn't the other way around. I bring her into mine, so shame on me the second time. And a couple of years later, same type of situation where she says God knows what to these other individuals, and now I'm getting shoved in the hall, horrible things written on my locker, told why don't I die already? I can't believe you haven't killed yourself yet. Just horrible, horrible things and other horrible things. I graduated high school with a lot of compounded trauma and grief, and I had no idea how to deal with it. So I just kept going on with my life. Just try to do better next time. Try to make better friendships. But there was a lot of chronic issues that kept me making very shallow friendships. And because I didn't have those boundaries in place, there wasn't a lot of long term. And there wasn't a lot of really meaningful, deep friendships. So, of course, it didn't lead to very long term things. Plus, I settled for a lot of abuse and a lot of neglect and a lot of different things that I would not necessarily settle for now. So when I got in that motorcycle accident and I started learning about the different grief stages and I started adapting the grief stages that I learned about to fit my own healing journey, I was working through that trauma. I was making peace with a lot of things, and then I was learning to set boundaries. And in order for me to set those boundaries, I really had to know what I wanted. I had to know who I wanted to be or who I wanted to become and what I wanted. I had to see that future and believe that that future me and that future life was possible, or none of it would make sense. You're just going through motions, not knowing where it's going to lead or if it's going to lead you anywhere at all. So you really have to have goals. You have to set goals and you have to have desires, and then you have to believe and have the faith that if you do these things, you're going to achieve those goals. You're going to reach those desires. And so now fast forward. Now, again, I'm the new person in a community. I move out to the country with my husband and my small kids. And I think at the time, this was right before I got pregnant with oh no, this is right after I was pregnant with my third child. So I was pregnant with my third daughter. I take one of my daughters to preschool. The preschool teacher's like, hey, she knew I was new. She's kind of a neighbor around the corner. And she hooks me up with this other mom who she always knew was kind of not in the clique with the other moms. And she said, you guys can make good friends. So, of course, when you see that and you're like, I am definitely lonely, you make fast friends. And if any of you know what it's like to make fast friends, sometimes it, it's exactly what it is. You move too fast, and then things start to go in ways that you said, I won't have friendships like this. I won't tolerate this. When I went into this relationship with her, I did have some boundaries, maybe not the same kind of boundaries that I have now years later, but I did have some boundaries and some kind of anticipation. I don't want to say like expectations. I know that's kind of a taboo word right now. You're not supposed to put expectations on other people and all that nonsense. Well, you do have expectations out of relationships, and they can be very basic and elementary. You can have expectations that there will be mutual respect. You can have expectations that you will enjoy things together. You can have expectations that you will help each other out, that you will have each other's back, and all those other things. And so that's what I mean when I say expectations. And you have expectations that you know your kids will be safe with them and that their kids will be safe with you and all those different things. So we become fast friends. Our kids hang around together. We start having the husbands come for dinner. So it's like the big family events. And we start babysit swapping. So I can go to the grocery store with all of my little brats running around begging me for stuff and having tantrums in the store. And she can do the same. And I would come back from these events and I would bring my one baby because she was small and I was pregnant. I could just have one kid. She didn't really talk much then. So I could push her around in the cart and I would leave my oldest daughter to play with the other two kids and the daughter was her age. And so I would come back from the store and the mom would always have these really like, you know, very she was nitpicking, complaining about like petty stuff about like, oh, look, your daughter did this and and your daughter was mean to my daughter and she didn't play with her. She didn't, like welcome her into playing with her and just weird stuff. And I was, so that was kind of like a flag for me where I was like, okay, I watch these kids. I see how they play together. And what I notice about your kids is that your son, who is a year and a half older than both of our daughters, is a little bit of a mean bully. And your daughter is a very quiet and reserved kid. She's maybe introverted and shy. I'm not really sure. They're 5 years old. I'm not an expert, but I just remember thinking you're being so hard on my daughter. Like, what do you want me to do? Maybe encourage them with some activities that they in real time you could try to help the kids do what you want them to do. But she would complain and then if when her kids would come to my house and her son is breaking stuff, he's hitting the kids with things and I would try to be like, you can't do that. You can't do that. And I would, I can't punish him, but I would say, you have to sit down. Give me the toy. You're not playing with the toy. And I'd have these fights with her son, and it would steal my peace. But I would do it, and then I would have the conversation because I would think, well, man, when I pick my kids up from her, she's telling me all about these little tiny new, like nonsense stuff. I'm going to tell her about big things. Like your kid is beating the other kids. Like that's a big deal. And so she would just dismiss it. And then in my head, I would think, well, I know that sometimes I don't get into things with my own kids in front of other people. I say whatever I'm going to say, but I usually say, I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to talk to them when I get home. And then I come home or on the ride home, I ask them, I don't say you were accused of this. I ask them, how did things go? I open up a conversation. I start feeling my way around. And then I would handle it. I would handle it in whatever way was appropriate that I felt was appropriate at that time. So I was at some point thinking, well, maybe she's doing that. Maybe she's handling it on her own. But the more and more I spent time with her, the more I was getting really disenchanted with whatever her hang up was for my daughter. She's 5 years old. She definitely had a hang up for my daughter. And so I thought that was really weird. So now, fast forward a few months later, we are at her son's birthday party. So he is turning 7. And she had a piñata. They did the piñata. And now The kids are running around, they're full of sugar, and you know how kids are when they're full of sugar. They're a bunch of brats. And they're hyper, and then they're crashing, and then they're hyper, and then they're crashing, and it's this vicious cycle. So my daughter is at the kitchen table with a couple of the adults, and of course this mom is, cleaning up from the cake and ice cream, and my daughter is her ice cream's melted in the bowl, so she's pretending she's a cat and she's licking it out of the bowl. And when the other mom, the grandma, starts kind of ridiculing her, so it was very apparent in that moment where this mom got her little nitpicky, ridiculous, complaining about your kid, this and that. She got it from her mom. And so hearing the mom going on and on and on about, oh my God, she's licking out of the bowl. And she just did it for a second. And then the more they started to say, what are you, a cat? She actually thought they were encouraging her. So she's in the bowl. So then my husband's like, you have to stop. So now the mom pulls me aside and is like, your kid is acting like an animal and all this nonsense again. I mean, it was really an innocent thing. I would have probably laughed. I, I don't know. It just wasn't the type of thing where you're like, you need major discipline. I probably would have talked to my kid again in the car and say, you might have went a little overboard there. You're not supposed to really drink out of the bowl, whatever. I'm sure I talked to her afterward, but I wouldn't have made it the kind of ordeal that they were all making it. So she pulls me aside, like, you can't let this happen, this kind of stuff. So I'm like, okay. So now I'm so irritated. I don't even want to be in the same room with them. I'm upset. And I don't want her to see that I'm upset. And I don't want to hear her mom or her prattling on about nonsense. So I go and I sit downstairs where some of the kids are running around and playing, and there just happens to be like a couple folding chairs down there. So I sit down in one of the chairs, and the kids are, of course, coming in and out of this space. And her son grabs the piñata bat. It's a plastic bat, but it's still a bat. And he starts beating kids, and my daughter included, beating all these kids, and they're trying to, like, ditch him, hitting them like they're the piñata. And I finally am like, you can't hit kids. And so I'm like, you have to stop. You can't hit kids. And I'm being kind of nice about it, and then he's like looking at me like, what are you going to do about it? He knows I'm powerless, and he knows, like, he's above reproach. And he's like, what, looking at me like that. And so finally I get up and I take the stick from him, and I come and I sit down back in my spot, and I don't say anything else. And so now he goes up and he tells on me. So now his mom comes down and she's like, you took the bat from my son. And I said, yeah, I don't understand why that's a problem. So we have this conversation. I tell her what happened. And we're talking about he's beating these kids for several minutes before I finally am like, just telling him not to do it's not enough. Like, you need to be told not to do that. But apparently he did, and he didn't care. And so I take the bat away. So she hands it back to him. And she goes, now go on and play, and lets him go off. And I kind of looked at her and was like, are you serious right now? And she was like, look, I don't appreciate you trying to punish my son, or bossing him around, telling him what to do. And I was like, you know what? I don't appreciate your son beating on my daughter. So we'll talk. And so I, like, clean myself up. I don't say anything to my daughter. I don't say anything to my husband about this. I'm not going to bring it up until we get in the car. And we leave. And of course, it's very hard for me to get my daughter to leave in the middle of this party, but I don't care. And so I had one more conversation with this mom. And then I was like, we're done. I'm done. I have no room for friendships like this that are leading to unsafe situations for my family. God knows what happens to my kid when I'm not there. So I can't trust you with my kid when I'm not there. I can't trust you to be rational. And I have clear boundaries. And some of those boundaries were just, again, I need to be in healthy relationships with people with a grasp on reality. I'm not saying you have to be perfect, because God knows I am not perfect. And um, I have my own weird way of doing things, and I give people liberty to have their own weird ways of doing things. That's not what I'm saying. But this was just next level things that I wasn't willing to accept in a relationship. And I didn't want my daughter developing a deeper relationship with friends that came from this family. Because if this is what's being tolerated and being taught and being modeled, it's only a matter of time before this is the way that the kids are treating her. And then she's stuck in that same cycle that I was stuck in high school, that I don't wish on my daughters. So I had to make those decisions. Like, I have boundaries. You don't act abusive in specific ways. And that, list of things that I had and on my survival guide, my list was, we're not tolerating that. And I don't have to argue and I don't have to explain myself. I think my phone call with her was maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And when she started to do all this other stuff, I just was saying, I I have boundaries. I used those words, and you keep crossing over those boundaries, and we clearly don't want the same thing. We don't want the same thing for our families, for our kids' relationships, and we don't want the same thing in our relationship. And that's okay. You're entitled to that. I'm sure you'll find people who are like-minded, and you can have those types of relationships if that's what you desire. But I choose not to have those type of relationships. And I cut myself free. I cut myself free because I wasn't going to allow this to compound and bring up old trauma and old triggers, things that I worked really hard at cutting out of my life, not just the trauma, but the crap that causes the trauma. So when we're talking about this whole idea of cutting yourself free, you have to think about the literal and the figurative sides of this. You're not just trying to cut yourself free from the trauma that you keep adding and all the struggles and the bad things, and you're like, I don't know how to deal with that, or I didn't know you're supposed to deal with that. I just, get over it and move on. Try again, try better, try again, get it better the next time. Those types of things that we're often taught in our culture are really not productive survival skills. They're not good. There was a particular moment in my life a few years later that I realized others could benefit from the strategies that I had learned through my own trials and errors. And this was when I was on book tour with my first book back in 2018. It was December of 2018. I was at a reading at the Detroit Public Library. I decided to, read some of my struggling working class stories. I read a couple of my assault pieces and just kind of gave a little bit of backstory for each one. So instead of using my entire time that I was allotted to just read work, I gave some of the backstory. So I was storytelling in between telling pieces, just kind of like not explaining them entirely, but just talking about different things that actually enhanced the pieces and the understandings in the reading. And so afterward, this 15-year-old gal comes running up to me and finds me and is like, thank you for reading those pieces. They really spoke to me. And I'm like, of course, right? And she flips her wrists out, and there's all these old scars, new scars from all the time she's cut herself. And she says, well, I'm an assault survivor. I've been assaulted, and she didn't use that word, but she said, I've been assaulted 3 times. She's telling me she's 15. She's been assaulted 3 times. And she said, I just survived my third suicide attempt. My grandma just picked me up this afternoon. So she literally just came from the hospital, stopped at the library for whatever. I don't know if she came to the reading or if her grandma was like, I'm going to this reading. You're coming with me. I'm not sure how she ended up coming from the hospital right to this event, but she did. And I'm very glad that our paths crossed that night. And so I tell her, I am glad that you didn't succeed at those suicide attempts. And I said, I know that dark place. It feels hopeless when you're going through it, but I promise you there's light beyond it. And she nodded and said, yeah, and she's like, how do you have it so together? Those things really happen to you. She's like, you seem so confident and happy. And I was like, wow, right, that word happy. And I was like, to be honest, there isn't a magical formula. There's no quick fix. It's more like many small acts of kindness that you do for yourself every day. She kind of nodded and she fell silent. And I said, no one will love and protect you like you protect yourself. Regular small acts of kindness, I repeated. The whole time we talked, her grandma shouting for her from the back of the room. And, she's trying to get them to leave. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I could, exchange information with her, give her my card, anything. And she just looks at me and she's like, it's really that simple? And I said, it's really that possible. And I said, now promise me. And her grandma's grabbing her by the hand. I said, you'll be good to yourself. Hey, I looked at her so she looked back at me. I said, promise. And she goes, I will. And then she was whisked away. And I left that experience just really troubled because I was like, I didn't help her. There were so many things I wanted to do and I didn't get to do it. But what that did is it showed me some things. And the first thing it showed me is how just getting up and telling our stories about how we did all of that really difficult stuff and how we came through it, how there was hope And there's happiness and confidence on the other side of it. We can be that person that we want to be and live our best life despite those things that happen to us. And some things are really horrible. And some things might not be as horrible, but they might feel just as horrible trying to get past them. There's no gauge for that. That kind of started me thinking about the first self-help book, Warrior Sister Cut Yourself Free, and helping other people. So it wasn't enough for me to just go to these readings and share some of the work that I wrote in my coming of age book. I wanted to do more. I wanted to create something that would reshape how young women and teens navigated that really tough grieving process to overcome their trauma and to become that warrior who saves their own broken world. And so that's where that idea started to cultivate in my writing life and in my speaking life. And it just continues. I just continue to wrestle with it and bring it into new topics or expanded topics into a broadened audience. And so for me, my number one best life hack to living more confidently with purpose and power is including small acts of kindness for myself and others in my daily life. My routine is this: love yourself well and then spread that love to others. There are unlimited ways to do this, some of which I explore in my 30-day restoration journey at the end of Warrior Sister Cut Yourself Free. I call this paying it forward. I've talked about it in greater depth in other episodes, but it's paying it forward with acts of kindness that you're speaking your own dialect. So acts of kindness in ways that you need to also have people invest in you so that it comes back in your own dialect. And this is more than the surface idea of extending kindness to receive it back. That's invaluable, sure, but you may be surprised to learn that paying it forward with love internally and externally is an essential way to rebuild your own sense of power and confidence. I know it might sound a little cliche, but in this case, love really is the answer. When you pay it forward to yourself and others with even the tiniest acts of kindness, you begin to learn and speak that love language fluently, and it comes back to you in your own dialect. It's a result that it'll happen. And you want to know the best part of this life hack? It's a free resource and superpower you already carry within. My second best life hack is to spend some time in the wilderness to see what you're really made of. You need to sit alone with yourself and your struggle. You got to sit there with the struggle, pull out the trauma, pull out the things, sift through your emotions and all the situational elements, and then view it all from this different perspective. You're not in the experience, now you're after the experience, sometimes immediately after, sometimes years after, when you've got this compounded trauma. And then whatever you see that you don't need for your survival or that doesn't have a place in your future, leave it in the wilderness. Okay? Do not bring crap out of the wilderness with you. Put it into the fire that you're going to use to keep yourself warm while you're in the wilderness. Burn it, leave it, don't bring it back out with you. And then while you're there, write a new survival guide. You have to fill that with whatever. I cannot give you a formula for that. You have to fill it with what do you expect? What are those desires? What are those goals? What is the character that you hope to grow into? We're all a work in progress, but what is the character that you hope to grow into? Because you need a survival guide and a map that is going to lead you on that path toward your desires and toward your goals, toward the life that you say will fulfill you. And you have to be reasonable about those things also. But you have to write the new survival guide. There's no way around it. You have to author it. And of course, that doesn't mean that you can't bring in other resources. That doesn't mean that if you're a spiritual person, that you can't meditate and pray on it, that you can't bring some of that knowledge that you already have from your spiritual walk and your spiritual life into this experience. It's not like you sit there and go, I have nothing. I need to come up with something. You're sitting down with a whole bunch of things that you have. You already have strategies. You already have tools. You already have trials and errors that you can say, this worked, this didn't work. I'm never going to do that again. I'm not sure how I need to get the results I want, but I need some new tools. So maybe you're bringing in outside sources like this podcast, or you're going to self-help books, or you're going to a therapist or a counselor, or you're going to someone within your community, to trusted family and friends, someone who's going to give you wise counsel, someone who's going to listen to you and maybe share with you things that worked for them. And so you're going to rebuild this whole toolbox and you're going to create a plan moving forward. And you're not going to leave that wilderness thinking, well, I'll rewrite it when dot, dot, dot. And then that when never comes because life gets busy. And then you find yourself confronted with another struggle. And now you're like, oh my God, I don't have a plan. Oh my God, I don't have those boundaries. I don't know what those boundaries are. Or you're getting upset because you're chronically stuck in these same patterns and cycles. And you're like, how the heck did I let this happen again? Why does this always happen to me? Why am I a magnet for this? And it could be several things, but maybe it's because you didn't have standards, you didn't have boundaries, you didn't communicate those or even uphold them. You don't have to sit with somebody and say, okay, here's my 5 boundaries. You cross them, you're out. I'm going to block you, cancel you, cut you out. You might not get to say all those things, but sometimes when someone crosses a boundary and you go, oh, wait, okay, I should probably tell you, don't do that. Like, I don't like that's, I'm not down for that. And that sometimes it comes up in conversation or it comes up in the relationship as something happens or as something's on the cusp of happening, then you have to say, wait, we probably should talk about, I have this boundary. Some boundaries have to be, disclosed up front. Again, there's no one formula, but you have to know what they are. And then you have to know what the plan is for when to disclose that or just when to practice protecting those boundaries yourself. You don't owe everybody an explanation. You might have a job and you have to leave that job because your employer or some coworker, something happens, you're going to go to your boss and sit your boss down and tell your boss how to run their business. In this situation, you're just going to be like, I'm sorry, this just isn't working out. I took another job. And that's it. That's the biggest thing. Maybe you tell them, hey, this is why I'm leaving. There's no fixing it for me. But maybe if you care, this is going on in your own company and you might want to address it. So you handle that however you feel it is appropriate for the situation. But in that situation, you don't owe them anything. Lots of times you just quit. Like you can see, clearly they know about the dysfunction, and that's why people don't stay there more than a few months. But I'm not staying here more than a few days because, again, I have my boundaries, I know my worth, I know my value, and I know what I just can't handle. I know I'm not going to lose my mental peace. I'm not going to enter into your wilderness where I don't have the right survival skills and the right tools to navigate it, and I'm not interested in it. I don't want to be in your wilderness. I don't even want to be in my own wilderness, but I know I have to go into my own wilderness to get a grasp on things. But I certainly do not have to journey with you through your wilderness. And so you make those hard decisions and you move forward. And that's the instance where you try again and you hope for better results. But you have a plan and you have a focus. You know what you're after. You know what you want. You know what you don't want. And that could change also. We change. So some things that I did not want in my 20s are, they don't even exist anymore. They're not even a concern for me now, but I have other concerns that I didn't think I never even thought would existed when I was in my 20s. And so we change. And so that survival guide is going to need to change. Our boundaries will shape and reshape. And sometimes we'll have to sit down with ourselves and say, well, I thought I had the boundaries and I'm not enforcing them for myself. And that's on me. And then you have to regroup and you have to figure out, are my boundaries reasonable? How am I enforcing them? How am I communicating my needs and my desires? Am I doing that? And you have to self-reflect and do that necessary work. So not only are you doing the work to cut yourself free from all that dead weight, and figuring out what you need to bring back out of the wilderness with you to move forward on this next leg of your journey, you're also trying to figure out your plan, your action plan. So you have those two roles. You're the manager of your life, and you're also kind of the counselor of your life, where you're like, okay, here's the self-guided help that I'm giving myself, and here's what the boss says is the new plan moving forward. So I hope that I've helped you see that you really do hold the power to restore your inner warrior and save your own battle-wounded world. You really held this power all along. All I've done is hand you a map and maybe a couple of skills to rewrite that survival guide, and I've given you some good places to stop along the way. Remember that ship analogy that I had you imagine? What if I told you once you reach your promised land, it's time to cut yourself free from that ship? I mean, some of you are carrying around enough baggage to fill that ship, even after you've cut yourself free from some of it. I know, because I once was that same person. I did the same thing. But so maybe it's time to not only burn some of that stuff in the wilderness there, maybe it's time to burn that ship and let it float back out to sea so that you can stay grounded in this new land that you prepared without the option of retreating back to the old ways of life that weren't getting you anywhere you wanted to go anyway. When you reach this point, you'll really have practiced that overcomer's mindset to grow as you face your new fears and you wrestle with the continually evolving complexities and grit that life keeps throwing your way. When you do this also, you've already rowed away from that storm-torn ship and you're on the solid ground. Stay there. Set up your new camp. Set up your new boundaries. Figure out if you're moving somewhere else. Build a new ship. You've got options, but don't retreat back into the old world. And if there's anything that's tempting you or is an easy pathway for you to get back to that, you need to cut the strings to it. You need to cut yourself free from that because a ship is a lot of baggage. Cut yourself free from it. Let it float back out to sea. It's not doing you any good. It will never, ever do you any good. And there's no need to return to those seas. You don't have to go back out to those seas. Okay? A restored and inner warrior has the power to calm those rough waters. And you just have to utilize those skills and utilize those tools and act with this new knowledge and draw upon your spiritual discernment, that sixth sense discernment that you already carry within to know what to do with the knowledge, to know what to do moving forward. If you decide to hit the water again, do so with the confidence and purpose of a warrior in a new ship, one ready to navigate life and any future storms awaiting beyond that horizon. And I hope these words really, really resonate and bless you today. And I can't wait to see where your journeys take you. So please drop a comment below about where your journey led you when you started practicing some of these things. What happened when you rewrote your survival guide? What happened when you finally got everything where you wanted it, or you knew where you wanted it to go, and you said, I'm not going back. I cut the strings and let the ship go back out to sea, and now I'm doing what? What is it that you're doing? What is it that you're working toward? Write me, drop me a comment, write me an email, put a comment in our Facebook group and give your testimony. Ask questions. What are other people doing in this particular situation? That's what the group is for. Find a way to immerse yourself into the different outlets that are already available to you within this community. We have a community, we just have to keep building it and nurturing it so that we're there for each other. That's what this is all about. And so, like I just mentioned, if you are not already a part of that free Facebook group, the Restore Your Inner Warrior Sisterhood, go ahead and find us and join the group on Facebook. This really is a safe place to get tips, exchange tips, and to share our stories and our testimonies, and to really get that community connection and support. And if this podcast inspired you, please consider leaving a written review on Apple Podcasts so that it helps other listeners see us and know about what we're doing over here.
Well, girl, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, don't forget to follow my channel and share it with girlfriends who also want to restore their self-worth and confidence. Also, If this podcast inspired you, consider leaving a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. And as you go through your day, may your empowered spirit, heart, and mind guide you. Catch new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Ciao.